Welcome back to the Gambling Chef Kitchen. We're going to be making another really special recipe for Magic Week, which is chocolate pudding cake. It is a cake that inverts itself in the oven and creates its own chocolate sauce. If you can believe that, it is so delicious. You're going to love this. So we have a couple of ingredients to prepare. Let's get started on that. I'll see you in just a second. All right, so the first thing you're going to be doing is preparing your chocolate. This is unsweetened dark chocolate, and it comes in 4-ounce packages, which means that there are 8 of these squares that look like this. And this recipe has 2.5 ounces. So you're going to use 4 squares plus 1 square, so 5 squares total, which is 2.5 ounces. And you're going to grate it on a grater that's pretty similar to this. I tried this with a microplane, but it was a lot harder and it kind of clogged it. So I find this kind of cheese grater size to be the perfect one. And this is the only part of the recipe that's a little bit tedious, I promise. And I did try to make this with cocoa powder in the cake. The topping has cocoa powder and that's fine, but the cocoa powder in the cake just did not taste as good. So this is the elbow grease part of the recipe. And I find it's easiest if you make one of these flat corners with your chocolate and just go for it. So I'm going to finish grating this and I'll see you in just a second with the rest of the ingredients. All right, step 1, we are going to make the topping, and it's pretty simple. It is a 1/2 cup of loosely packed brown sugar. When I say loosely packed, that means when you put it in your measuring cup, you're not going to squish it down with your hand. You're just going to kind of get it in there until it's a 1/2 cup. This is a 1/4 cup of white sugar. Then we have 3 tablespoons of unsweetened cocoa powder. Make sure I get everything out there. There we go. 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt. And we're going to mix those together with a whisk. Doesn't have to be perfect. And this is a little weird that you add this at this point, but you actually, to this, are going to also add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And this is one of the reasons I'm using a whisk, because you kind of want to make sure that you get that mixed in. It's going to look weird and chunky, and that's totally fine. That's how it's supposed to look. This is going to get sprinkled on top of the cake batter, and then we're going to pour boiling water on it, and this is what's going to sink to the bottom and make the sauce. Mush it together the best that you can with your whisk, but that looks pretty good. I'm going to set this aside, and we're going to make our cake batter. It is time to make our cake batter, and it is very easy. First, we're going to do the dry ingredients. So we're going to do 1 cup of all-purpose unbleached flour. We're going to do 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We're going to put in our 2.5 ounces of grated chocolate. And I know y'all had so much fun grating. Let me see if I can get the rest of that out of there. There we go. Then we have 1/2 cup of white sugar. And we have a secret ingredient, which is a teaspoon of either very finely ground coffee like this or instant coffee. I had this Turkish coffee in my freezer that was super finely ground, so it's perfect for this. And I think that is it. Oh no, I forgot 1 dry ingredient. Then we also have 2 teaspoons of baking powder. It's very important. This cake does not have any eggs in it at all. So your baking powder is your leavening ingredient. And we're gonna mix the stuff together. I do think you could easily make this a vegan cake. I haven't tried that, but if you substituted almond or oat milk for the whole milk that we're going to add, the chocolate doesn't have any dairy in it already, so you're good there. And then instead of the melted butter that we're going to add, you could use some sort of vegan butter substitute. And I think that this would be a delicious vegan cake, actually. So we're just mixing that together. I just want to make sure it's all incorporated. It's not really a huge deal because we're going to mix it when we put the wet ingredients in right now, which are, this is a 1/2 cup plus a tablespoon of whole milk. Probably could get away with using a different type of milk if you did not have whole milk. Let's get that a little bit mixed, and then we're going to add 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter. This is European style butter. That's pretty much the only type of unsalted butter that I use. It has a slightly higher fat content. And then 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. So the milk I added, it was 1/2 cup plus 1 tablespoon of milk. If you don't add that extra tablespoon, the batter is really, really stiff. It's gonna be a pretty stiff batter anyway. So it just helps you to be able to mix it together. That's why it's such a weird proportion. Normally I try not to do stuff like that. So I'm just gently folding this together. You don't wanna whip this thing to death, but you do wanna get to the bottom and get the rest of the dry ingredients stirred in. Again, you can see this is a pretty stiff batter. It's not a loose batter, and we want a stiff batter. But if you don't add that extra tablespoon of milk, believe me, you will be having difficulty stirring this together. So over here, I have a prepared pan. You want to use something like this, or a glass baking dish would be okay for this, I think. But it really needs to be something heavy. I wouldn't use metal for this, for instance. And all we're gonna do is we're gonna plop, such a essential word. We're gonna gently place our batter in the bottom of this. And I have greased this with some butter, by the way. I should have mentioned that, and I did not. If you have a little bit of unincorporated flour, like you can see right there that I have, that's okay, because we're going to spread it out and it's gonna get mixed in, so. All right, so we're just gonna spread this into the corners. This is not a fussy recipe. Even if it looks terrible at this stage or you're worried about it, I promise it's going to be absolutely delicious. This is actually a recipe my dad and I discovered when we were craving something and we didn't have eggs. So we had this old cookbook, and it was first published in 1901. It's one of my cookbook Bibles. I love it. Called the New Settlement Cookbook, and we found this recipe for chocolate pudding cake, and we made it, and we were blown away. So this is a tribute to that recipe. Okay, I'm gonna get the rest of this batter off of this, of course, using my finger. Let's be realistic. Most of you guys watch cooking shows, and they gently scrape things off with like another spoon, and they're like, oh, here we go. Let's look at the reality of what happens in your actual kitchen. You know that you're using your darn finger, so I'm gonna use my finger too. Let me wash that for you guys, and I'll be right back. So we've got our prepared cake batter, which tastes delicious, by the way. You know that I licked my finger off before I washed it off. This is a safe one to eat. There are no raw eggs in here if you're worried about that. So give your kids some to taste and enjoy it yourself. This is that topping that we made to start off with the cocoa powder and sugar and vanilla. We are just going to pour this on top. And if you're worried about how that looks on there, you can definitely smooth it out with something. And in the microwave, I'm actually heating up a cup of water to boil it. And I will be right back with you in 1 second when that's ready, because that's what we're pouring on top. So here comes our cup of boiling water, and you're just gonna pour this right over the top. And I know you're gonna think at this point that I'm crazy, but I promise you, this is so good. So this is gonna go into a 350-degree oven for between 40 and 45 minutes, and that's gonna depend on the depth of your container and how hot your oven is. I will show it to you when it comes out. I'm excited. Look what just came out of the oven. It's so tasty looking. Let me zoom in here so you can see the glistening, beautiful brownness there. I hope that you guys try this recipe because it is so good. It smells amazing, but I can't taste it yet because it's a little too hot. So I am gonna wait a couple minutes, and then I'm gonna cut into it so I can show you guys the chocolate sauce, and then we're gonna taste. Okay, are you ready to see the magical cake here? So I'm just gonna have to scoop a piece out so you can see the chocolate sauce, which is right there. Okay, it is time to taste. I am very excited. I'm gonna go right for the fudgiest part right here that I put on top on purpose. It's so moist and chocolatey. And the coffee in there gives it a little hint of something that you're not sure what it is, but you definitely don't think coffee, which is why I put it in the recipe. It really adds a special flavor. I hope you try this and all my recipes. They're all available on thegamblingchef.com, my website. And please be sure to follow and like me on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube. And I'm also on Instagram. And I will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me.